It is the Martha Zoller Show, and joining me right now is someone I've really been looking forward to having on the program. His name is Josh Levs, and he recently started a podcast called They Stand Corrected, and it's a podcast that takes a look at what the mainstream media is saying about Israel and Hamas, and just putting the truth there. Okay, and pushing back and telling the truth. And I've had a conversation with him, but I've listened to the podcast, and I just love this man. And I knew that I had to have him on to talk about it because he is swimming upstream in a very difficult place. Josh Levs, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? And thank you so much for that intro. You know, that's the perfect image. That's what I'm doing here, swimming upstream. I love it.
So you've done 9 episodes so far, and they covered topics like, you know, the death toll, the media death toll failings, the lies about international law, the media's hypocrisy, the Queen of Jordan's interview. But the most recent one I thought was really interesting because it's about the presidential debates, the secret rules that silence the truth. Why did you choose to take a little diversion from what you have been talking about to address the presidential debates?
Yeah, you know, when I originally envisioned the program, when I was thinking about it last year, They Stand Corrected, it was going to be about all kinds of failures in mainstream media. Because the fact is, there is not standard fact-checking of everything that is said. There's no system to make sure that when someone is interviewed on one of the big networks or quoted in one of the big papers, that what they're saying is true. So I was going to tackle a whole bunch of different issues. And then October 7th happened. And it just became so clear that there is nothing more pressing in terms of fact-checking the mainstream media than dealing with the structural, systemic anti-Israel bias, which just by definition is anti-Semitism. It's a different set of rules for just a tiny Jewish state. But I also am still touching on other topics, like the fact that presidential debates are designed to let people lie and not be fact-checked. And when people listen to that episode, they'll hear that I also do talk about anti-Israel bias in that episode as well, because I say, look, one opportunity is when you're asking the candidates questions, you can take that moment to point to facts. You know, like point to civilian deaths and tons of other wars that the media don't talk about. Point to civilian deaths in U.S.-led wars. And so there is an opportunity in any topic to show the breadth of media failure when it comes to fact-checking.
So have you seen the Time Magazine article that just came out about President Biden?
No. Talk to me about it. I'll check it out.
There's a wide-ranging interview that was done on the 28th of May. And interestingly enough, what Time did, and of course, a lot of people don't even know Time Magazine is still around, right? I mean, it's all online, but for those of us of a certain age, every office you went into, every home, every place had a Time Magazine, right? And it was something that was kind of the news. It was a news wrap-up kind of magazine. It had a little bit of everything. And what they did is they sat down with the president. They asked him all kinds of questions. They actually published the entire transcript of the article, and then they did a fact check on it, which I found to be very interesting because they do kind of lean left. But he did an interview with CNN, the publisher of Time Magazine, and said, to CNN, that it is clear that this president does not have the cognitive ability that he had 4 years ago. All you have to do is compare. And he got a lot of very important details wrong in this interview. And I thought that was kind of earth-shaking. And I don't know how much traction it's going to get, but we shall see.
Yes. You know, in general, the only information that we should be getting from news is factual information. The whole concept of the way that news has developed, especially over the last couple of decades, has pulled us away from that to the point that people are so used to certain kinds of bias that they only have certain, news agencies that they are willing to trust, which I get. But imagine if there was a news system that said, instead of reporting just what people say, we will only give you fact-checked information. So if what you just described from Time was literally the daily process. Like, not here's what the person said, but here's what the person said compared to what's true. And, what I say on the show is, in order to have truth, you need two ingredients. You need facts and you need context. And if you don't have both those things, you're not getting facts. And so what we have in our society, and you and I have talked about this, is there are a lot of fights going on about, Israel with some of these crazy protesters out there, about U.S. politics, about anything, in which people are not starting with a joint understanding of what the facts are. And until we have a system that says, okay, let's first look at what we know dispassionately before the narratives and opinions and feelings, what do we know for a fact? Then you can have your disagreements. It would be such a different situation for our whole society. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we've paid a high price for that transition of newsrooms going from being not profit centers to being profit centers. And it kind of started with 60 Minutes. I think 60 Minutes was the first sort of news magazine program that made a lot of money. And then newsrooms started thinking, oh, we can make money too. Well, what happens is when you become a profit center, as opposed to the entertainment side paying for it, which is what happened up until that point, then you start worrying about how many people are watching, and you don't really worry about the truth or the facts. And it's a sad thing. But I want to shift gears and talk about Israel and the deal that's on the table right now that you heard Jake Sullivan allude to. I mean, and he said quite accurately that Israel has agreed to this deal. They've agreed reluctantly to it, but they've agreed to it. They agreed to the last deal. That the bottom line is Hamas needs to come back to the table. I don't know why we're negotiating with terrorists, but I guess that's just what you have to do in this situation. But also the backdrop is every day we're hearing about hostages that have been confirmed to be dead. And my biggest fear for weeks has been they're all dead. And I just don't know how, when they finally admit to the bodies of those two little children that are 1 and 3, I just don't know what, I don't know what this world's going to come to.
Yeah. It is, I'm so glad you said that, and because that really is the core of all of it. First of all, Hamas is a terrorist organization. In America, we like to say we don't negotiate with terrorists, and a lot of the same people who say that then go out and complain in these marches that Israel isn't negotiating enough or doing enough to negotiate with terrorists. So there's profound hypocrisy there. The idea that the hostages might be dead, that is very widely believed and likely, sadly. And, the idea that Hamas even knows as one sort of joint entity, even that is ridiculous. When you look at, this is a terrorist organization. There are terrorists around Gaza. It has support from Iran. And it's not like this super organized system in which everyone knows everything. There may be some terrorists in Hamas who think some of them are alive or don't know where they are. And there are other terrorists that are not part of Hamas. There's competition to be the bigger terrorist group in Gaza from Islamic Jihad and some others. And they might have some of the hostages. So what everyone should always remember when they hear all this is that there was an agreement already in place as of October 6th. There had been lots of previous pulse to fighting, and Hamas chose this. So now when there's discussions, what will it accept, what will it not accept, I would not put any faith in what Hamas says it will do. And let's imagine they come along and they say, okay, we'll accept this. Well, that's nice. How long does it last? They've accepted other ones before, and they just used that time to launch another one. The only way to really end it would be to disarm them.
And am I correct that, that they did not complete the last deal they made as far as releasing hostages? They released some, but I think there were another something like 40 that were supposed to be released back in November that were never released.
Yeah, I mean, based on the numbers that we heard, yes. Now, we don't always know what goes on in these behind-the-scenes negotiations, and this is part of what it helps for people to understand. Sometimes you'll hear Biden or Blinken or somebody else in the government make some statement, and what I know is often that's reflecting what they have to do or have to say because of negotiations that have been happening in Qatar among these different sides. So how many ultimately Hamas, quote unquote, agreed to let go of last time, and how many we heard they let go? We don't know. It's so unclear. But yes, it certainly seemed that the expectation was that they were supposed to let a lot more hostages go. And then there were some reports suggesting that when they went to look for these hostages, they didn't know where they were, or some of them were dead. And that gets into the coverage of Rafah as well. You know, Israel was, of course, yet again being attacked by the media for daring to launch military efforts in Rafah, but hostages were in Rafah, and Hamas was shooting from Rafah. And it's likely that if there are hostages alive, that they are in populated areas near Rafah. So, yeah, the topic that the media should constantly come back to is the fact that the people of Gaza and Hamas could end this war at any time by returning the hostages, disarming Hamas, and agreeing to having a non-terrorist government. That's what it would take.
Now, there's a generational thing. I spoke to Major David Baruch from the IDF, and you know, obviously he speaks about the military part of it, but he did share that his, you know, he has 5 children, 4 of which are serving in the IDF, and he shared, I don't teach my children to hate Arabs. I don't teach my children to hate Palestinians. But the problem we have ongoing in Gaza is that they have been taught for the last 20, 40, I don't know how many years to hate Jews. I mean, to the point where they have a reenactment that children do where somebody's dressed up like an IDF soldier and other little children are pretending to kill them. And I don't know how you fight that, Josh. I mean, I don't know.
Yes. So I'm like, you know, we were talking about fact checking the media. So recently I did a 2-parter about this quote unquote interview with the Queen of Jordan, who was on MSNBC with Joy Reid, and Joy just sat there agreeing with everything the Queen said. And one of the many ridiculous things the Queen said is that Israelis are so very prejudiced against Palestinians. And so then I came in and I explained, look, there's prejudice everywhere, but also 20% of Israel's population are Arab people, and they're fighting in the military too. And the head of Israel's largest bank is Arab, and they're in the government. And meanwhile, in Arab nations kicked out Jewish people generations ago, and then the Jewish people had to flee to Israel, where then Arab nations tried to kill them there. And for generations, Hamas and others have been teaching children to kill Jews, to hate Jews. So the racism, the hatred is, of course, going to be present in those communities. And sure, you can find some bigotry among Israelis, as you can among Americans or anywhere else, but there's no comparison. So it's not just that these kids in schools are being taught this, it's that generations have been taught this. So adults believe this too. And there are videos of these mothers and fathers, a lot of mothers especially in these videos, saying how very proud they are of their kids for becoming suicide bombers and terrorists who go bomb Jews. And there's video of attackers from October 7th calling their families and saying, aren't you finally proud of me now? I just killed all these Jews, including children. So what you have is a generational problem. And ultimately, what you'll need is a transformation in society. And this is why it does come down to who is in charge there. You need schools, you need education, you need systems that will teach people the truth, that we are all human, and that these lies they've been hearing about history, about being the ultimate victims, about having everything robbed from them, only makes them part of the world and was never the whole truth. So if we can get a new system in place in which today's children finally start to be educated about reality, about truth, then 20, 30, 40 years from now, things will look different. But the idea that Israel could snap its fingers and get rid of all the hatred instantly through some kind of deal, that is ridiculous.
Well, Josh Levs, I know people can find you everywhere podcasts are, and it is called They Stand Corrected. Anywhere else people need to look to find your work?
Yep, I have my website, joshlevs.com, JOSHLEVS.com. And also, just like you, I am on Substack. I have a newsletter that goes out now, and I subscribe to yours. It's fantastic. And I encourage everybody to check out mine, too.
Thank you so much. Josh Levs, we'll talk to you again.